for access off of the 57th Street, there's a curb break there. So that traffic would have the opportunity of coming in off of Ryan Road and coming along that full frontage and in, rather than always having to use this intersection. We got an aerial that we can just zoom out a little bit, or is there one in the packet? There's one in the packet.
Commissioner, I recall all of that several hundred years ago. And the decision from the DOT, the recommendation from the DOT was we not use that and close that up. That's how that east side of 58th Street got closed up, so that you couldn't come off of Ryan Road and come down onto 58th Street. Couldn't turn.
Their logic is that you have to come down 60th and approach it from the
You have to
north.
come on 60th, or you have to go back to,
Why is there a curb break and driveway there, I would
because
ask?
it's been there forever.
Well, and again,
You're
if we're cleaning
asking
it
me
up,
to argue
if we're
with
cleaning it
DOT?
up, let's clean it up. And I'm just suggesting that it might make sense to vacate the portions east of this. I understand nobody's requested that, but I do not fully understand why DOT would have any issues with a right turn in off of Ryan Road at this location. 60th is a signalized intersection. The next one over, if you look at this exhibit, it shows it.
Yeah. As I recall, it was turning movements and queuing and stuff that the DOT likes.
I get all that. I guess I'm asking that somebody ask the question right now. It would make some sense. It's different than what's there, but your traffic circulation might actually improve because they could approach it from the south up 58th Street. They can also approach it through this driveway off of Ryan Road. I'm not trying to design the world for you, but if we're going to fix it, let's fix it.
Excuse me, but I've lost you a little bit. So you're saying coming off of Ryan onto 58th Street?
Yes, regular. Can you go to this one that's zoomed out a little bit?
Yeah, past Kendor.
Yeah. The problem is,
Understood, but it's also right of way. I mean, I can envision the property owner to the east, so, and this just opens your site up to access from 3 different routes, given there's traffic issues or whatever. And yes, forgive me, I'm asking the question.
It's outside of, and so there will be full access area to be vacated because that will be private property. Talking access right to the north. Technically.
57th. No, I'm not suggesting access 58th to Ryan. It would be 57th, I would believe, to the right there, you were there. There's a right-in turn that they're using as a driveway, and it's also right-of-way at this point in time. So we're cleaning up half of it, but not the other, and if the two neighbors got together, that could be opened up as a driveway that allows access from 60th and Ryan, 57th and Ryan, or you can come down 60th and come in from the bottom of 57th Street. It opens you up instead of having one driveway.
But that would mean no vacation.
No, you vacate it, but we get them to work with the neighbor to the right because they need to vacate the vacation. You've got the same situation there.
there's a problem with
You're
that.
saying it's public use for that area. Keep it as a road.
This section of road is used as a public roadway for 2 different companies. Right here, it's used for Crohn's, shipping and receiving. And here, it's used for Kendor Marine. So we really wouldn't want to vacate this, because then that would make the Crohn's folks have to come in and do all of this. So
My opinion, it would be very messy. You're going to have truck trailers. I don't think Kendor would want more truck traffic coming down 58th Street, making that right-hand turn past Doro, past Kendor. I mean, we're talking 50.
I'm not suggesting that you lose the entrance at 60th Street, but that's the most problematic one from a safety perspective. So if some of the traffic, depending which way people are coming, can come in off of 57th or from the bottom, it just gives you more options. It's a more functional plan. I'm not trying to throw a wrench into this. It's just, these are questions that should be asked. And if I didn't realize, I figured that the portion to the east was the same situation, but if that's a city street, then why don't we just keep the right of way and pave the street on through to 60th Street? That's all I have.
It may be better that we do not increase any other access to 60th. Currently, 60th only serves his car parking lot in the front of the building. The semi-trailers are all further south off 60th. So I think from how it's operating practically now, it seems to be working.
That's right. I'm just asking the question. Let's think it through now
Mm-hmm.
so that we're not back here in 3 months trying to clean up something else.
Sure.
Thank you.
Okay, let's give this a shot. Is there a motion to recommend the common council to approve street vacation pursuant to the resolution it introduced therefore, as amended pursuant to staff recommendations to vacate a total of approximately 0.57 acres of right-of-way previously used for service road purposes, which abuts the south side of West Ryan Road, State Highway 100, from South 60th Street to South 58th Street, and which is abutted on its south boundary by 9521 West Ryan Road, tax keys is listed, 9521 West Ryan Road, tax key listed, 5825 West Ryan Road, tax key listed properties, and to direct the city engineer to prepare and deliver the plan commission report that the street vacation is reasonable and is processed pursuant to law, and that a new CSM be prepared for approval, including the appropriate lots. I don't want to get into your family business. I'm sorry, land combination plan.
That's in the resolution.
And sign and landscape easement.
That's in the resolution.
Okay, then forget all the last of it. Forget all of the from pursuant to law. Leon and Hanneman. I was trying to be an attorney. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thanks, Eldon.
Thank you very
Have a
much.
great day. Thank you very much. Okay, move on to item, what is this, D? D3, Unified Development Order and Rewrite Task Force. This is now sections, Articles 10 and 11. Mr. Martinez.
Thank you. This session is to follow up on the previous session that Marion has with the Plan Commission. The last meeting about Articles 10 and 11. 10 is for plan development standards, and the non-conforming building structure and uses is Article 11. We have the consultants, Jose Levine and Bersland Planning, that are joining via soon, and then I will yield to the consultant.
Thank you, Regulo. I will share screen here. Is everyone able to hear me?
Okay, well, it was a second. Okay, should be good.
Great, thank you. Is everyone able to hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you.
Great, thank you. So thank you, task force members, for joining us here again. We're glad to be here to discuss Articles 10 and 11 of the Unified Development Ordinance rewrite. Just a couple quick notes on the agenda tonight. We'll start with a quick overview, a look at where we're at in the UDO rewrite
Recording in
process.
progress.
We'll do a quick overview of Articles 10 and 11, Plan Development Standards and Procedures, and non-conforming building structures and uses, and go over a few of the comments that we've received thus far, and then cover next steps in the process.
Ruben, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but 1 second. I just want to note for the record that the attendance at tonight's meeting includes only the Director of Economic Development and staff and Plan Commission members. Commissioner Leon.
Question to the chair and the city attorney, and please correct me if I'm wrong. This is the same two articles that we discussed at last meeting. Can we just go to the instructions that we gave and skip a lot of the stuff we've already covered so we can simply get to, we made some recommendations if you're going forward with them, if not, the why of not, in the interest of time?
As you all know, that would be my preference.
Certainly
Regular
my
Ruben?
preference too.
Yep, I think we're glad to follow the city's preferred procedure for tonight. We can skip right to a few comments that we've received so far on the document. Unless there are any from the commission that you'd like to cover first off.
Well, I'm going to just chime in here. This is the fourth time in a row now where I spent all kinds of time rereading a document that I read that had no changes to it, and I'm making the same changes to the document the first, second time. We're done with this, but it certainly is annoying. A huge waste of time. So I vented.
Okay. So I think we'll start off. Really, the big idea with Article 10, Plan Development Standards and Procedures, is that the existing PD district is being reworked into a new process where PUDs are, plan development is an overlay district, and all base district standards are maintained. The city will approve deviations from the base district standards when the applicant provides certain amenities and amenities that go and above and beyond and kind of what the base zoning allows. So that is the big idea with Article 10. We'll skip right to this section here. This general provisions. This is section 1510.02. This has to do with what types of development are required to go through the plan development process. Some communities want to require that certain types of development go through the PD process. And this is a question that we had for the task force to think about, is whether any should be required and any types of development should be prohibited from going through the process. So with, we had a couple placeholders in this section for now. We had discussed with staff that really there shouldn't be any requirement that any development go through the plan development process, but that the existing 3-acre minimum site size requirement for plan development from the existing UDO be retained. And then we had drafted that development with only single-family detached residential uses is prohibited from going through the plan development process. So we just wanted to pause here and see whether this makes sense to the task force.
Said differently, you can't put a single-family development through a planned development district.
Correct.
Works for us.
Okay, great. So if there's no other points on this section here, we'll continue on. Modification standards. These are,
Sorry, Ruben, 1 second.
yes,
Mr. City Attorney.
What happens to the existing plan development districts? Do
Yes,
they remain
we're-
in existence? And how is that addressed, or are you technically rezoning them
No, the existing,
without a property owner request to do that?
The existing plan development district remain.
That's stated somewhere in the redrafts?
Well, actually, in
Yep.
in the zoning map, there's
In the UDO that's being rewritten, does it address existing planned development districts?
Yes, so in the ordinance, in the establishment of districts, we're proposing that a legacy district be established for the existing planned development district, and this would accommodate all of the existing parcels that are governed by planned developments. So this recognizes that no new parcels will be rezoned into the planned development district. They'll go through the new planned development overlay district process. But all of the existing planned development district parcels will remain as they are currently, and that's stated in Chapter 3, Establishment of Districts.
And all of the regulations for those existing districts would remain the same, correct?
Yes, because those are
Yes.
established by ordinance in the adoption of the planned developments.
Okay.
Yep. Yep, so that is the idea with the planned development legacy district. All those existing PDD approvals will remain as they are. So going back to modification standards for the new overlay, we heard that public gathering space should really be, that's one of our criteria here for modification to the base district standards. That should be really clarified as accessible to the general public when it's provided under the plan development process. So I think we're glad to make that change. We also heard that placemaking, this is another criterion here, the modification standards, that placemaking should be really better defined. And we're happy to make some adjustments to the text to kind of draw that out a little bit. But we also wanted to mention too that placemaking will kind of hinge on the city's policy documents over time. So things like the comprehensive plan, that if that gets adopted over time and sort of expresses how the city wants to have a certain character for development in a certain area of the community, as it changes over time, or other city policy documents, then those will really be the documents for the city to lean on to say whether a certain PDD meets that placemaking criterion. And also, just to point out that all of these modification standards are phrased a little bit broadly, and they do require some interpretation for by the Planning Commission to determine whether they're fulfilled or not. There'll need to be some interpretation of that over time, as it is a discretionary approval process.
Ruben, I want to back
Yes, sir.
up. I'm sorry, I apologize for doing this, but I got to jump in where I can. Back up one slide, thank you. Public gathering spaces, I have some concern about that. The intent of that, I'm great for gathering spaces, but if this is a private development, I imagine that could be a requirement for public park space, which I'm fine with, but to require public access to a piece of land in the center of a development that's a private development doesn't seem to me to be a wise thing for a city to require, unless it's a public park. So I urge the consultants to word that very carefully and keep in mind personal property rights when we do this, and practical application. So that's it for that. Thank you.
Mayor, I think that's a fantastic point, and I would like to point out that none of these modification standards are requirements. So a plan development applicant would not need to meet all of these modification standards. They would need to base any site development allowances they are requesting off of at least one of them. So they only need to meet one of these per site development allowance. So if it's a development that where public gathering space doesn't make sense, then they certainly would not need to use that modification standard to justify any site development allowances they are requesting.
Got it?
Yep, that's a good point. So moving ahead, standards of review. These are the standards by which the Plan Commission, Common Council will judge the plan development as a whole. There's 7 of them here, drawn out in greater detail and sort of defined in the text here. Plan and policy alignment is really one of the big ones. We heard from the preliminary session that standards to ensure fiscal value to the community should be established in the standards of review for plan development. So we just want to return to that, make sure that's something that the city wants to see carried into the standards of review. This will really apply, these standards of review, I think, really apply to all plan development, so they will have to fulfill, unlike the modification standards, plan developments will really have to fulfill all of these criteria up here. So we just wanted to return here and make sure that this is something that the task force wants to see worked in.
Well, I'll start this one off. I would certainly like some fiscal analysis of the cost of the development to the community as we go forth in approval processes. However, how do we define that, and what's our criteria, and what's the cost of that? So, yeah, I'd like to see it happen. I just don't know what the practical reality is of it. I'd certainly like to hear from the commission.
Good. And I'm going to sound a little bit like a broken record. I apologize if this had been discussed at our earlier meeting in March. I unfortunately was ill that night. But this is also my last time up to bat, as I am leaving council and not going to be on the Plan Commission anymore. But I hear from many in the community, we've heard it here at our previous meetings, we have not addressed any standards for sound amplification. So as I'm looking under standards of review D for public welfare, I'd like to tighten that up a little bit, if we could. Will not impair an adequate supply of light and air to the adjacent property, but then will not substantially increase danger of fire or otherwise endanger the public health, safety, and welfare. I think that's really vague, and we're not able to measure that against any standard. But I do foresee times in the future when an applicant would come forward with an application for a planned development district where larger public address or sound amplification systems might be a part of that. And I think we need to think about it and address it now. So when we say otherwise endanger the public health, safety, and welfare, you know, including things like pollution, light pollution, sound pollution, those sort of things that we're kind of running up against now. Likewise, how that relates to E, compatibility with adjacent land uses. All adverse impacts have been mitigated through screening landscape, public open space, and other buffering features that protect the uses within the development and surrounding properties. Again, that's pretty vague. Because I think we have to be able to identify what impact is causing X level of adversity for adjacent property owners, and what sort of mitigation does that look like? As I sit here today, I would be perfectly happy to prohibit any sound amplification systems within a PDD. But that's my personal opinion. And, so I'd be happy to take a little additional comment or thought on that, but I just feel we're being really loose in how we're evaluating adverse impacts.
Well, let me offer two comments. One is as you read that sentence, if the uses are not generally compatible, all adverse impacts have been mitigated. Who's to determine what all is? That particular word opens you up to forever litigation for anything. Your worms are crossing across my border, and they shouldn't have been. Sound and light mitigation, we can regulate that, but at the end of the day, it comes down to the responsibility of the operator. And enough of that. Commissioner Leon.
So it's a bit rare that I disagree with the alderwoman, but I do in this case. I look at the ordinance as intentionally vague, that it has these broad strokes, and that is the responsibility of this body to make a recommendation to the council and apply greater restrictions to an individual applicant. So that after a public hearing, after staff reviews, if the light, noise, increased traffic will have an undue adverse effect, that in that particular application, we put restrictions upon them, presuming that they go through the council, and that having the ordinance be overly specific would restrict unnecessarily future proposals. So I'm comfortable with it being looser with the standards and more vague in this case. And we've heard lots of on individual applications come before this body, and we listen, and then we make recommendations. So I think it's appropriate.
To build off of that, that is the intention of the plan development process, is to provide some general framework to guide decision makers like yourselves in the approval recommendation of plan developments. However, I do want to touch back on the comment on noise and some of the other adverse impacts that may come from development. We can certainly address those in other sections of the ordinance. We did want to circle back on that topic at the next work session with you all, where we wanted to discuss some performance standards like noise that we could add to the development standards section, and which would apply to all development throughout the community. And then a plan development would still need to meet those standards unless they were requesting a site development allowance, for which they would need to meet a modification standard. And you all would be able to judge whether or not that would be appropriate in the place that they are proposing it in the community.
Okay. Maybe as a compromise between those two positions, they're enumerating many specific things and then leaving it general. And I think that really takes care of both things. It might make sense to include specific language in there, just as we have done with the other things. Include sound and light spillover in those, but then still leave the broader sentence vague.
Okay,
I
Ruben.
think that's a great middle ground.
Yep.
Carrying on.
Yep, I think those are good points. We're glad to draw that out and mention some of those things like light, sound, pollution, and then I think keeping some of it general will allow the commission to still judge on a case-by-case basis and sort of assess the merits while keeping things flexible. So next,
Joe
sorry,
Beth.
Ruben. It's Julie Beth. Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. We had talked a couple of times about an option for having performance standards for things like light trespass, noise, et cetera, that could be either in the UDO or the municipal code. We'll present a draft of that. I also do want to point out that some of the language that we're looking at right now is in your current PDD standards in substantially the same form. So there is, as the Plan Commissioner said, already a process by which the Plan Commission has to exercise judgment and make those recommendations. So that's not it's not a new issue, and it's a universal issue for Plan Commissions when they're looking at this. But we'll, I think the performance standards can and will address noise in a more quantitative way. It's never easy, but that is part of our next task with you.
Ruben.
Okay, great. Thank you. So next section in this article is procedures. This is the process by which an applicant will file for plan development. And this is really based on the existing procedure in the existing UDO. There's really 4 steps, starting with the pre-filing administrative conference, pre-filing project introduction, plan commission hearing, and common council action. We did hear the note from the informative session that the pre-filing project introduction should be with common council rather than the plan commission. That's just the city's preference on how they want to structure it, and we're glad to make that change. That's up to the city. Some communities will want that that step to go to both bodies or one or the other, but it is really up to the city. So we just want to return to that and make sure that that's the revision the city wants to see.
I would make the suggestion that that since they are optional, you're calling it a pre-filing, we called it a concept review, but those go to the plan commission and the council. That's how it was historically. I've been around like 16 years, and all of these things, all concept reviews. And then the council decided that they wanted further control on it. And the point is no one's surrendering control, but to bring it in front of one other body and get some feedback, it's non-binding, there's no vote on it, I think makes sense. Because since that has changed, we see things coming through that have been in the hopper and being processed by the city for months, and they're put in front of us in an instant. And then it's a little bit too late to be bringing up your concerns or comments, and I think you could all look at me when we say that. I wouldn't have to be bringing up comments if we had further exposure to what they are. So that's a decision for the council, but I think there is merit in both. We charge a fee for that. It could be one fee for both. This commission meets every 2 weeks or so. It would be no burden for somebody to come in and spend 5-10 minutes giving us a presentation on what they're proposing. My thoughts. And I have the same sort of thoughts about major minor amendments. We'll get to that, but we're throwing all the minor in the hand of the zoning administrator, whoever that may be. That was historically not the process either. That stuff started in Plan Commission. We made a determination. It's quick. It takes a vote. And then if it's minor, it clicks right on through. So we're trying to simplify things that don't really need simplifying. My thoughts. Thank you.
Ruben.
Okay, we're definitely glad.
I was just going to say kind of the reverse of what I said with Alderwoman Hanneman. I don't often agree with Commissioner Haley on issues, but I wholeheartedly agree on this. And, and there are things that Commissioner Haley has brought up that I absolutely wish had been addressed earlier in the process so that we could resolve it and it not be so rushed right before something's going to go before council. So, yeah, I absolutely think it should be both. As Commissioner Haley proposed.
And you know what? Going through my head is another meeting might not be the best. There might be an issue here with our process that could be fixed that would allow the Plan Commission time to look through the documents, familiarize themselves, and make the necessary changes. That doesn't doesn't add to another meeting that the Common Council feels is very important, and does not add time to the process. So I understand what you guys are looking for, there might be a different answer than another meeting. So that's where my head's at.
Same meeting.
I was looking for solutions, right? So if there's a concept review, we invite the plan commission and notice it. At the same meeting.
Just put the same presentation on for the plan commission.
And see, I'm trying to avoid another meeting for the applicant. So anyway, okay, well, let's move on, yeah.
Okay. So it sounds like,
Yeah, I would say that that's absolutely the responsibility of the applicant, and wholeheartedly agree that they should come before twice.
so it sounds like there's agreement that project introduction should go to both bodies before plan commission hearing. So we can make that update. This again is the Plan Development Legacy District we've covered. Now, last section of Article 10, this is defining major changes to approved plan developments that are approved through this overlay process. Major changes are decided upon like an original plan development. They'll have to go through the process. And it's really defined in the draft as any of the changes here that meet one of the 7 requirements up on the screen there. We did talk with staff originally since drafting these standards about increasing the threshold for an increase in floor area, that provision 5 there, to allow a little greater degree of change to go through the minor process, the minor change process. But we just wanted to return to this right now and ask whether these 7 sort of criteria here are appropriate changes. And it sounds like maybe from Commissioner Haley's comment, there's interest in having minor changes go back to the Plan Commission for approval rather than the zoning administrator, just as a quick Plan Commission approval.
I just see these comments. We spent the last 20 years almost trying to fix our process. We still can't get a project through here in 90 days. And now we want to add some more to it. So I just, I'll go with whatever the commission wants, but be careful what you ask for, city engineer.
So I do think 5% might be a little shy. I think it needs to be a bigger issue to be a bigger change. I think 5% increases, there's not a lot. You don't have to change much to increase your parking lot by 5%. So in an open space by more than 5%, I like the flavor of 2 and 3, but maybe that 5 should be larger. And I don't know what the magic percentage is, but 5% seems like you're barely touching it, and it automatically trips you into a major change.
500 square foot addition? Not much. Let's be smart about this, or let's try to be smart about this. Where did these numbers come from? If they're in our ordinance, we're in trouble.
These are some standards we've used in other communities to sort of as a benchmark for major change or a kind of a substantial change that the Plan Commission would want to see again. We're certainly glad to adjust these sort of as Franklin sees fit here. So that's what we're here to do.
Thank you, Julie Beth. Yeah, Patrick, push your button. Thank you.
So 2 things, and maybe I misheard earlier, but I don't agree that minor changes should come back before the Plan Commission. I want to make sure I didn't hear that wrong. But I like round numbers, and to the city engineer's point, if it takes, 5% is very easy to do. What about 10%? 10%, something where it's gonna, then you are talking a major change. So, I saw Ms. Hines' comment about very standard, but if we're coming up with a threshold, we think 5% is too small a number to change it to a major increase. Is 10% a better number?
I guess I'm dissenting from that a bit. 5% seems reasonable to me. Point being, this is a planned development district. We've already made exceptions in that situation. Who's here? So, to simplify the process, the applicant comes before us, they put together their whole plan. We see some issues with it. But once that's approved, it should have been tweaked by Plan Commission Council, that PDD to be able to stand on its own. Now, yes, things change in the future, but there shouldn't be this large threshold. I think even 10 is excessive. 5 makes sense because you're proposing to make changes to something that was already changed radically at concept and theoretically answered all the questions. So things change, you want to put in a little patio or whatever, but it's not too much to have somebody come back and say, this changes it. We've got concerns with drainage, it might only be 500 square feet of paving, but it might make a significant difference in the way the overall site drainage functions. If our job is to preview this stuff for the council, I think it makes sense to set a lower bar. And 5 works perfectly good with me because it already should have been perfect to begin with. And things change, they want to come in and change, then don't be afraid to come in and explain why and how, and make sure that engineering gets their whack at it and that we make sure it makes sense in the bigger picture, because that's what the PDD was to begin with. Plan Commission and Council saying, we'll give you some exceptions here, but this is what we need to see.
So I'm not suggesting that it doesn't get looked at. I'm just not sure that it rises to the level of having to make it a big deal in a public appearance anymore. So, engineering gets a whack at pretty much everything. I don't care if it's 1%, if they're got any kind of change or, those kinds of, there are some processes that allow staff to look at it without having to rise to the level of going through the, public meetings and so forth. So I just feel like 5% just, when you think about what that means to somebody adding onto their driveway or something like that, parking lot, that's very, very minor. I just, that's my feeling.
So let's just leave it and the common council can kick it around. Go ahead, Ruben.
Great. We'll circle back on that. And I think one thing to keep in mind too is that all of these thresholds are kind of a net increase. So if there's a decrease in one area in impervious surface, it can sort of be offset without counting towards that 5% if impervious surface is added elsewhere. But we'll make a note to circle back on that. So that takes us through Article 10, Plan Development Standards and Procedures. Just wanted to touch on a couple of comments from the first session. There were a couple of comments from the task force about kind of keeping the existing Plan Development District title for the new process there. That's just something that it sounds like the city's used to and is interested in retaining. So we just kind of wanted to see what the thoughts were a little bit more on that. And there was a couple comments on requiring a set quantity of housing be provided at an affordable rate to qualify for that affordability standard in the modification standards. That is included in the draft as it's written, that at least 15% of the housing would have to be designated for at an affordable rate to sort of meet that standard. But just wanted to circle back on these couple comments and see if there were any other input on this article.
How do we define what a housing unit is? That's one issue that you can just fix, and the city attorney needs.
To provision 4F, affordable housing. The reason I said should state at least is because that provision does not. It says the planned development includes 15% of the total residential dwellings. So the way I read that, you either have 15% or you can't do it. It doesn't say less than, it doesn't say more than, which is why I said it should say at least 15%.
Yeah, there's a bunch of those throughout the document, but we're gonna have to clean all that up. Okay,
Yep, I think that's a good comment. We're glad to make that change, and certainly any other sort of tweaks to the language or suggestions on sort of wording or phrasing of this, I'd encourage everyone to send along a marked up draft or written comments that indicate where you'd like to see some change to the text. We're glad to make those. So that takes us through Article 10. Draft of Article 11. This is non-conforming buildings, structures, and uses. So this article really governs non-conforming building structures and uses, allows them, these are those building structures and uses that were legally established under the UDO's provisions previously over time, but have become non-conforming due to a change in the ordinance. So the goal of this section is to allow those uses to continue over time, to not impose any real restriction that they come into compliance, but not to encourage them to continue, and but to encourage them to be sort of phased out over time. So this is really based on text in the existing UDO. It's a lot of existing provisions that have been retained. But to just return, I think now to the city's goals for nonconformities. At the beginning of the process, this is what we understood in the RFP, that the city wanted a method to address nonconforming lots, buildings, structures, and uses. So we just wanted to point out that a lot of that has been addressed in previous articles, in particular Article 3, by removing, sort of simplifying some of the lot size and width differentiations, some of the nonconformities analysis that sort of showed us how lot area and width standards could be adjusted to bring more existing lots into conformance with the standards, and some targeted map amendments to bring more uses into conformity with the standards. A lot of this addressing nonconformities we've done in the previous articles, and Article 3 in particular. So Article 11 will just govern non-conforming buildings and structures and uses that do continue to exist under the draft UDO. It won't, because the UDO won't address every single situation. There will be some still. So look at the article's content. There's 10 different subsections, again, really based on the existing UDO text. There's a couple changes, revisions made for consistency with other articles. For instance, we don't regulate floor area ratio. There's no standard for that in the draft of Article 3. So we've taken a couple mentions of that out of the nonconformities article, because it just won't apply in situations anymore. And also, we've relocated nonconforming situations in the floodplain districts to that section of Article 3 and revised per the state model ordinance, as that is sort of the best practice for non-conforming situations in floodplain districts in Wisconsin. So we're glad to go over any questions there are on this article. There was some discussion earlier in the earlier meeting on this provision. This is from the existing UDO on substitution of new equipment. The provision's right up on the screen there. Allows the Board of Zoning and Building Appeals to approve an application where new, say there's a non-conforming site, new sort of outdoor equipment or new equipment would result in less incompatibility with neighboring uses. So just as an example of that, we think that this is an okay provision to keep from the UDO that exists now, but just, for example, a non-conforming commercial site replaces some outdoor equipment in a way that generates fewer off-site impacts like noise as determined by the board, that would be able to be approved under this provision there. So just wanted to see if there's any other comments on Article 11.
I think we're good. It's going to be a busy article once we start rezoning. Go ahead.
Great.
Jesse, hold on, city attorney?
Well, I had a couple of comments at the last meeting. So you're saying that the substitution of new equipment for the Board of Appeals is actually in the existing Unified Development Ordinance? With regard to
Yes.
with regard to legal non-conforming uses?
Yes, that is an existing provision.
Okay.
Yes.
And then the other one was section 3D. If two or more substandard lots with contiguous frontage have the same ownership as of the effective date of this UDO, the lots involved shall be considered to be an individual parcel for the purpose of this UDO. So that essentially takes private property from the owner that the owner owns, and you're changing it. And my simple thought when I made this comment at the last meeting was, let's see, parents own both of those substandard lots, and one child happens to own a home adjoining to the west of a substandard lot, and another child owns one adjoining to the east, and they intend to give those parcels to each one, but now you're combining them. And what if the private property owner purchased those two separate lots for some reason? And now just by a code amendment ordinance, you technically can combine their property? That seems somewhat unusual to me.
That is language from your existing UDO that's under section 15-3, 1003. So we are more than happy to sit down with you and refine these nonconformity standards to make them what they need to be for Franklin. But we did just carry forward much of the language that you have today. So we'd be happy to maybe schedule a separate call with you and refine this language to a point where you're comfortable with the content.
Well, that's interesting because I don't recall seeing that since 1998, and I certainly don't recall that occurring, for whatever that's worth, in the real world.
Yeah, so we're happy to make any adjustments that may be needed to this existing language.
We'll look at it, or I'll look at it again.
Okay, anything else? City attorney?
It was 4B, non-residential district standards, substandard lots. I had a question. Oh, I'm sorry, 4B. 4B, buildings. Any legal non-conforming buildings or structure may be continued in use provided there is no physical changes other than maintenance and repair. But no physical changes. And I'm just thinking, okay, isn't maintenance and repair, you put a new screen on for a furnace or whatever, physical change, I don't know, it just seemed. No, new roof is physical change. Me.
Yeah, we can certainly define that more
That's
clearly.
enlarged or
Most,
something along those lines.
yeah, we can certainly clarify the language. Most communities will say if the level of investment is 50% or more of the value of the property, that's a very typical threshold for when the standards of the UDC would need to be complied with. So we can clarify that language.
Correct, and that's the current UDO.
So all of that language that you were just referencing is actually in your current UDO. I'm looking at it online right now. So we can certainly get that revised to what it needs to be.
And then the last one was 6B3. When a building is in a residential district containing residential nonconforming uses, said building may be altered in any way to improve livability. I just thought that was extremely subjective when I commented on it last meeting. And I actually looked up livability and the definition thereof in Merriam-Webster Unabridged Dictionary. Definition of livability is a noun. Number one, means survival expectancy, used especially of poultry and livestock. Number two, suitability for human living. So I just thought that seemed pretty.
So again, attorney, we'd be more than happy to sit down with you and discuss some of these wordsmithing items to the existing language of the ordinance. So why don't we circle back to this at a separate meeting and we can really get that language to what it needs to be.
Whatever it takes. We can work it out. That's it for now.
Thank you. Not to digress, but going back to 3D, is there some reason that we would want to do it as written? I concur with the city attorney, but are we missing something here? Is this just to consolidate parcels? What's the rationale behind that, please?
That is a very typical standard to have in a nonconformities section. It's basically saying that if you have two lots next to one another, both are nonconforming under the standards of the ordinance, they can be considered as one zoning lot so that they will be in conformity with the ordinance and can be developed upon.
Thank you.
Otherwise, each lot would not be able to be developed on because it wouldn't meet the standards of the ordinance.
Then I might suggest that we use can instead of shall in that paragraph, something to that effect.
Okay, we can certainly
Can is what you
get that.
Okay, and then just the other general comment, is it safe to assume that somewhere in this document, the beginning and the end, we'll have a listing of definitions of key terms?
Yeah, we have the Article 12, that is definition. That is the last article that the consultant will work on.
Thank you.
Somebody, and I hate to pay my city attorney to do this, but somebody needs to go through the entire document looking at shall, will, et cetera, for imperatives and permissives to make sure that we're not doing something unintentional. Anybody else? Regulo? Is that it?
Well, just information about the next steps. So
Yep, so that takes us to where we're headed next. For the April meeting, we'll have discussion and review of natural resource standards on the 24th, and perhaps circle back on a couple things like performance standards and things like that in other code sections, but really focusing on natural resource standards, the draft. So that takes us through what we had for this evening. Thank you.
Regulo.
Yeah, just confirm what Ruben said at the next session about the natural resources.
Is there a motion to adjourn? Moved by Alderwoman Hanneman, and Godspeed to you, seconded by Commissioner Haley. All those in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carried.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Have a good evening.
Thank you, everyone.